Sarah Mitchell was 30 years old when she realized that no matter how hard she worked, she would never be enough in her parents' eyes. For nearly 8 years, she had dedicated her life to earning a PhD in environmental engineering, sacrificing sleep, financial security, and countless personal opportunities in pursuit of research she believed could make a difference in the world. While most people her age were building careers, buying homes, and starting families, Sarah spent her days in laboratories and libraries, and her nights analyzing data, writing papers, and preparing research proposals. There were weeks when she survived on little more than coffee and determination. The stipend she received as a graduate researcher barely covered her rent, forcing her to live modestly while watching her peers move ahead financially. Yet despite the struggles, she remained committed to her goal because she believed that meaningful work required patience, sacrifice, and persistence. Unfortunately, her family saw things very differently. Sarah's parents came from a practical, traditional background where success was measured by visible achievements, a high salary, a prestigious job title, a large house, and financial stability. To them, education was valuable only if it led directly to wealth and status. Research, especially the kind Sarah pursued, seemed abstract and impractical. They never asked about her publications, her fieldwork, or the discoveries she was making. Instead, every conversation eventually turned to one person, her younger brother Derek. Derek was everything their parents admired. After graduating from college, he quickly secured a well-paying position at a consulting firm. He dressed in expensive suits, worked with corporate clients, and spoke confidently about promotions and bonuses. When he was accepted into a prestigious MBA program that his company agreed to fund, their parents treated it as proof that he was destined for success. Family dinners became celebrations of Derek's accomplishments. His promotion was discussed for hours. His future salary was proudly shared with relatives. His plans to buy a condominium before turning 30 became a favorite topic of conversation. Sarah often sat quietly at the table listening as her parents praised her brother while barely acknowledging her own achievements. The comparisons never stopped. Whenever Sarah visited home, the same questions surfaced. "When are you going to get a real job?" her father would ask. "Don't you get tired of studying all the time?" her mother would add. Sometimes they would laugh and say, "Derek is already planning to buy a home. What are you doing?" They never seemed to understand that Sarah's work required a different timeline, that groundbreaking research could not be measured by quarterly earnings or annual bonuses. Every comment felt like a reminder that she was falling short of their expectations. Over time, she stopped talking about her research altogether because she knew no one was listening. Still, she hoped that earning her PhD would finally change their minds. She imagined her parents sitting proudly in the audience during her graduation ceremony, watching her walk across the stage after 8 years of relentless effort. She believed that once they saw the degree, once they witnessed the culmination of her sacrifices, they would finally understand. That hope shattered 4 days before graduation. Sitting alone in her apartment, reviewing her dissertation one final time, Sarah received a text message from her mother. At first, she smiled, expecting words of encouragement. Instead, she read that her parents had decided not to attend. They believed her PhD was impractical and not worth the time or expense of traveling to the ceremony. They explained that Derek's future MBA graduation was far more important because it would actually help his career. As Sarah stared at the screen, another message arrived, explaining that they were tired of telling people she was still in school at 30 years old. In that moment, something inside her broke. 8 years of sacrifice, 8 years of determination, 8 years spent chasing a dream she believed mattered, all of it seemed to be dismissed with a few casual sentences. The people whose approval she had secretly hoped to earn had reduced her life's work to an embarrassment. Alone in her apartment, surrounded by stacks of research papers and the dissertation she had poured her heart into, Sarah felt a crushing sense of rejection. It was not simply disappointment. It was the painful realization that no achievement, no matter how extraordinary, could change the way her parents saw her. For the first time, she understood that the battle she had been fighting was not just for a degree. It was for recognition, acceptance, and the belief that her worth could not be measured by someone else's definition of success. The years that followed were some of the most difficult of Sarah Mitchell's life. While many of her friends were building careers, earning steady incomes, and moving confidently toward financial security, Sarah was buried in research. Pursuing a PhD in environmental engineering demanded far more than intelligence, it required endurance. The small stipend she received as a graduate research assistant barely covered her living expenses. Some months, she had to carefully calculate every dollar she spent, skipping vacations, postponing purchases, and accepting a lifestyle of constant financial uncertainty. To supplement her income, she worked as a teaching assistant grading assignments late into the night and leading undergraduate laboratory sessions during the day. Her schedule was relentless. Many nights she remained in the university laboratory until dawn running experiments that often failed without explanation. Months of work could disappear in a single mistake, a faulty measurement, or a result that simply refused to support her hypothesis. Yet the technical challenges were only part of her struggle. Her research focused on renewable energy solutions for developing regions, particularly solar microgrid systems, capable of bringing affordable electricity to remote communities. To gather data, Sarah traveled extensively throughout sub-Saharan Africa. These trips exposed her to realities that few people in the developed world ever witnessed. She visited villages where entire communities lived without reliable electricity. Children attempted to complete their homework by the dim light of candles or kerosene lamps. Medical clinics struggled to store vaccines because refrigeration was unavailable. Small businesses were forced to close after sunset, limiting economic opportunities and trapping families in cycles of poverty. Standing in those villages, Sarah saw firsthand how something as simple as electricity could transform lives. The experience reinforced her belief that her work mattered, even when others failed to understand its value. Despite her growing passion for the mission, the emotional burden often felt overwhelming. The long periods of isolation, the endless research setbacks, and the lack of support from her family weighed heavily on her mind. Whenever she called home, conversations inevitably turned into comparisons with her younger brother Derek. While he was climbing the corporate ladder and earning promotions, Sarah was still conducting experiments and writing research papers. Her parents questioned whether her sacrifices would ever amount to anything meaningful. Their doubts slowly became her own. There were nights when she sat alone in her apartment staring at unfinished chapters of her dissertation, wondering if they were right. What if she had chosen the wrong path? What if all these years of effort led nowhere? What if the world simply did not need what she was trying to create? But every time she considered giving up, she remembered the faces of the people she had met during her fieldwork. She remembered children struggling to study in darkness and communities waiting for opportunities that electricity could unlock. Those memories pushed her forward. Slowly, the years of effort began to produce results. Her research findings attracted attention within the academic community. She published papers in respected scientific journals, presenting innovative solutions for scalable solar energy systems in developing nations. Colleagues and experts praised the originality of her work. More importantly, her advisor recognized the significance of her contributions. After reviewing her completed dissertation, her professor described it as one of the most impactful research projects she had seen in decades. For the first time, Sarah felt that someone truly understood the value of what she had dedicated her life to achieving. Finally, after 8 years of sacrifice, failures, breakthroughs, and perseverance, Sarah completed her dissertation. The day she successfully defended her research should have been one of the happiest moments of her life. Academically, it was a triumph. She had earned the title she had worked toward for nearly a decade, Dr. Sarah Mitchell. Yet the emotional victory felt incomplete. On graduation day, she dressed alone in her apartment. She carefully adjusted her doctoral robes, placed the velvet tam on her head, and looked at herself in the mirror. She had imagined this moment countless times, believing her family would be there to celebrate beside her. Instead, there was only silence. As she arrived at the ceremony, she watched other graduates laughing with parents, posing for photographs, and embracing loved ones who had traveled great distances to support them. When her name was called and she walked across the stage, there was polite applause from strangers, but no familiar faces in the crowd. No one stood to cheer. No one shouted her name. No one waited afterward with flowers or hugs. That evening, after the ceremony ended, Sarah returned alone to her apartment. She ordered takeout food, placed her diploma on the table, and sat quietly in the empty room. The achievement she had spent 8 years pursuing had finally become reality. Yet the people whose approval she had secretly longed for were absent. The loneliness was almost unbearable. But what Sarah did not know at that moment was that the knowledge, resilience, and purpose she had developed throughout those difficult years would soon become the foundation of something far greater than a degree. The world had not yet seen the impact her research would create, but the seeds of that future had already been planted during every sleepless night, every failed experiment, and every painful step of her journey. For Sarah Mitchell, success was never supposed to be measured by a paycheck, a job title, or the size of a bank account. Yet the years following her PhD would prove that true success often emerges from the very paths that others dismiss as impractical. Shortly after graduating, Sarah accepted a postdoctoral research position at Stanford University, where she continued developing innovative renewable energy solutions for underserved communities around the world. It was there that fate introduced her to Michael Torres, the founder of a struggling startup called SolarReach. The company had a bold vision to bring affordable, sustainable electricity to regions that traditional power grids could not reach. However, despite having passionate employees and promising technology, the company was running out of money. Investors were losing confidence, revenue was minimal, and bankruptcy seemed almost inevitable. When Michael first approached Sarah, he believed her research on solar microgrids could be the breakthrough SolarReach desperately needed. At the time, Sarah viewed herself as a scientist, not an entrepreneur. She had spent years immersed in academia and felt more comfortable writing research papers than discussing business strategies. But as she listened to Michael describe the company's mission, she saw an opportunity to transform years of academic work into something that could directly improve people's lives. Leaving Stanford was one of the most difficult decisions Sarah had ever made. Academia offered stability, prestige, and a predictable career path. Joining a nearly bankrupt startup offered none of those things. Friends and colleagues warned her against the move. Some believed she was throwing away the future she had worked so hard to build. Even her parents saw it as further proof that she lacked practical judgment. Yet Sarah could not ignore the possibility that her research might finally leave the laboratory and reach the people who needed it most. Driven by conviction rather than certainty, she accepted Michael's offer and became a co-founder and technical leader of SolarReach. The early years were brutal. The company operated with limited resources, and every month felt like a race against time. Investors rejected proposal after proposal, questioning whether rural communities in developing countries represented a viable market. Many believed the technology was too expensive, too complicated, or too risky to scale. The engineering challenges were equally daunting. The first generation of solar microgrids experienced technical failures, maintenance issues, and Number 7 now. Number 7 way. There were moments when Sarah wondered if everyone else had been right. She had already spent years proving herself in academia, and now she was risking everything on an uncertain dream. Yet each setback strengthened her determination. Instead of abandoning the mission, she and her team treated every failure as a lesson and every obstacle as an opportunity to improve. Their breakthrough came through a series of pilot projects in East Africa. The first installations were launched in rural communities in Kenya where thousands of families had never experienced reliable electricity. The results exceeded expectations. Children could study after sunset. Medical clinics could safely store life-saving vaccines. Small businesses could remain open later, creating new economic opportunities. Encouraged by these outcomes, SolarReach expanded into Tanzania and Rwanda. Each successful project generated new data, improved the technology, and strengthened the company's credibility. Communities that had been overlooked for generations suddenly gained access to opportunities that many people in developed countries took for granted. For Sarah, witnessing these transformations firsthand was more rewarding than any academic award she had ever received. As word spread, attitudes began to change. Investors who had once dismissed the company started paying attention. Funding rounds that had previously seemed impossible were suddenly oversubscribed. SolarReach secured millions of dollars in investment, allowing the company to expand operations across multiple continents. What started as a small, struggling startup evolved into a global enterprise dedicated to solving one of humanity's most persistent challenges, energy poverty. New projects launched across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. The company's innovative solar microgrids reached remote villages, schools, healthcare facilities, and small businesses in dozens of countries. Within just a few years, millions of households gained access to reliable electricity through technology that had originated from Sarah's doctoral research. Recognition soon followed. Sarah was named to Forbes 30. Under 30 received prestigious international innovation awards and became a sought-after speaker at global conferences focused on sustainability and social impact. Governments, nonprofit organizations, and business leaders praised SolarReach as a model for combining profit with purpose. Yet despite the growing attention, Sarah never viewed these achievements as the true measure of success. The headlines, awards, and financial milestones were merely byproducts of a deeper mission. What mattered most were the lives being transformed. Every time she visited a village illuminated by SolarReach technology, she was reminded why she had chosen this path. She saw children reading after dark healthcare workers, preserving medicine, safely entrepreneurs, growing businesses, and families experiencing opportunities they had never imagined possible. Eventually, Solar Reach grew into a company valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. By traditional standards, Sarah had become exactly what her parents once wanted her to be: wealthy, successful, and respected. But the irony was impossible to ignore. The very research they had dismissed as impractical had become the foundation of a global enterprise. The years they viewed as wasted had produced innovations that changed millions of lives. Through her journey, Sarah demonstrated a powerful truth: real success is not defined by status, salary, or public recognition. It is defined by the impact we create, the problems we solve, and the courage to pursue a meaningful purpose even when others fail to understand it. Her story became proof that the most extraordinary achievements often begin with ideas that seem impossible, dreams that appear unrealistic, and people who refuse to give up on what they believe matters most. 4 years after the lonely day she walked across the stage to receive her PhD, Sarah Mitchell received an unexpected invitation from Stanford University. The Graduate School of Business wanted her to deliver the keynote address at its upcoming MBA graduation ceremony. By then, Sarah was no longer an unknown researcher struggling to prove herself. She had become the co-founder and chief technology officer of Solar Reach, a rapidly growing renewable energy company that had brought electricity to millions of people across the developing world. Her work had earned international recognition, major industry awards, and a reputation as one of the most influential young innovators in sustainable technology. Yet when she first received the invitation, Sarah hesitated. The request forced her to revisit memories she had spent years trying to bury: the disappointment of her own graduation, the absence of her parents, and the painful realization that the people she loved most had never truly understood her work. Her hesitation deepened when she learned another detail. Derek would be graduating from Stanford's MBA program that same day. For a moment, Sarah considered declining the invitation altogether. The wounds left by years of comparisons and favoritism had never fully healed. Although her life had changed dramatically since earning her PhD, there remained a small part of her that still remembered sitting alone in her apartment after graduation, eating takeout food while other families celebrated together. But after several days of reflection, she accepted. She realized this was not simply an opportunity to speak to hundreds of graduates. It was an opportunity to share a message she wished someone had told her years earlier. In the weeks leading up to the ceremony, Sarah worked tirelessly on her speech. Every draft became a journey through her past. She reflected on the nights spent alone in the laboratory, the failed experiments, the financial struggles, and the moments when she had nearly given up. She remembered the text message from her parents refusing to attend her PhD graduation because they believed her degree was impractical. She remembered the countless conversations in which her accomplishments had been overshadowed by discussions about Derek's promotions, salary increases, and career prospects. Most importantly, she reflected on the lesson she had learned through years of hardship: that success could not be defined by other people's expectations. It had to be defined by purpose, impact, and personal conviction. On graduation day, thousands of family members filled Stanford Stadium. Sarah arrived early, reviewed her notes one final time, and waited backstage. Meanwhile, her parents arrived to celebrate Derek's achievement. They were excited, proud, and eager to watch their son receive his MBA. Neither of them knew that Sarah was the keynote speaker. In fact, they had no idea how dramatically her life had changed since the last time they had truly paid attention to her career. To them, she was still the daughter who had spent too many years in school pursuing an impractical dream. As the ceremony began, graduates took their seats while family members filled the stands. Derek spotted his parents and waved proudly. Everything seemed normal until the dean stepped onto the stage and announced the keynote speaker. Large screens illuminated the stadium as photographs and achievements began to appear one by one. The audience watched images of rural villages, transformed by renewable energy, international conferences, innovation awards, and headlines celebrating groundbreaking work in sustainable development. Then Sarah's name appeared across the giant screens. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the dean announced, co-founder and chief technology officer of Solar Reach, Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree, recipient of multiple international innovation awards, leader of a company that has brought reliable electricity to millions of people around the world. The color drained from her parents' faces. Her mother froze in her seat. Her father stared at the screen in disbelief. Around them, thousands of people applauded enthusiastically, unaware of the emotional storm unfolding in section 114. For the first time, Sarah's parents were seeing her through the eyes of the world rather than through the narrow lens of their own expectations. When Sarah walked onto the stage, the applause grew louder. She stood at the podium and looked out across the crowd. Her eyes eventually found her parents. For a brief moment, the memories came rushing back, the loneliness, the rejection, the years of feeling invisible. Then she began to speak. She spoke about education not as a pathway to wealth, but as a tool for solving meaningful problems. She described the value of curiosity, perseverance, and learning for its own sake. She shared stories from her research trips to villages without electricity, where children studied by candlelight and clinics struggled to preserve medicine. She explained how years of academic research dismissed by many as impractical had eventually become the foundation of technology that transformed entire communities. She reminded graduates that innovation often begins with ideas that seem impossible, and that the most important work is frequently misunderstood in its early stages. As her speech continued, she challenged conventional definitions of success. "The world will constantly tell you what success should look like," she said. "It will tell you to chase titles, salaries, promotions, and approval. But true success is not measured by how much you earn. It is measured by the lives you touch, the problems you solve, and the difference you make when nobody is watching." The stadium remained silent as thousands listened carefully. "There will be people who doubt your dreams," she continued. "Some will tell you that your path is impractical. Some will compare you to others. Some may even be the people you love most. But if your work creates value, if it serves a purpose greater than yourself, then keep going." The greatest achievements often come from refusing to abandon a vision that others cannot yet see. For a moment, Sarah paused. Her voice softened. 4 years ago, I stood on a graduation stage very much like this one. My parents did not attend because they believed my degree was a waste of time. At the time, I thought that was the most painful moment of my life. Today, I understand something different. Their absence did not diminish my achievement. Their approval was never the source of my worth. My purpose was. The crowd fell completely silent. Never allow someone else's definition of success to become the limit of your potential. When she finished, the stadium erupted into applause. Thousands of people rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Faculty members applauded. Graduates cheered. Parents wiped tears from their eyes. But Sarah was only watching 3 people. Her mother was crying openly. Her father sat motionless, struggling to process everything he had just heard. And Derek stood proudly among his classmates, clapping harder than anyone else. For the first time in their lives, Sarah's parents truly understood what they had failed to see. They had spent years measuring success through money status and conventional achievements, while their daughter had quietly built something far more significant. She had not only achieved professional success, she had changed lives on a global scale. The realization hit them with overwhelming force. They had underestimated her, dismissed her work, and judged her path unfairly. Yet despite everything, Sarah had persevered. That day was not merely a graduation ceremony. It was a moment of reckoning. A moment when years of misunderstanding collided with undeniable truth. And as the applause echoed through the stadium, Sarah finally received something she had stopped expecting long ago, not recognition from strangers, but understanding from the people who mattered most. When the graduation ceremony finally ended, Sarah found herself standing at the center of a moment she had imagined countless times but never truly expected to happen. The applause had faded, the graduates were celebrating with their families, and the stadium was slowly beginning to empty. Yet for Sarah, the most important conversation of her life was only beginning. As she stepped away from the stage, she saw her parents making their way toward her through the crowd. Their expressions were completely different from the confident certainty they had carried for years. Her mother's eyes were red from crying, and her father looked older, somehow weighed down by a realization that could no longer be ignored. For a few moments, nobody spoke. The silence carried years of misunderstandings, disappointments, and unspoken pain. Finally, her mother broke down. Through tears, she apologized for missing Sarah's PhD graduation, for dismissing her dreams, and for measuring her worth through standards that had nothing to do with who she truly was. Her father admitted that he had spent years believing success could only be measured through financial security, promotions, and conventional achievements. They confessed that they had been so focused on what they thought Sarah should become that they had failed to appreciate the extraordinary person she already was. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself to say everything she had kept inside for years. She spoke about the loneliness she had felt while pursuing her PhD, the heartbreak of receiving their message, refusing to attend her graduation, and the pain of constantly being compared to Derek. She explained how every comment about getting a real job or every comparison to her brother had slowly eroded her confidence. She told them that the deepest wound was not their criticism but their lack of curiosity. They had never truly asked about her research, her goals, or the lives she hoped to change. They had judged her path without ever trying to understand it. As the conversation continued, Derek stepped forward and surprised everyone. He admitted that he had always known he was treated differently. For years, he had benefited from being the favored child while remaining silent about the unfairness he witnessed. He confessed that he should have spoken up sooner and acknowledged that his parents' constant comparisons had damaged his relationship with Sarah. Looking directly at his sister, he apologized not only for his silence but also for allowing their parents' expectations to define how they viewed each other. His honesty broke down a wall that had existed between them for years. For the first time, they spoke not as competitors in a comparison neither of them had created, but as brother and sister. Although the conversation did not magically erase years of hurt, it marked the beginning of something new. Healing came slowly. In the months that followed, there were phone calls that lasted longer than a few minutes, letters filled with reflections and regrets, and dinners where difficult topics were finally discussed openly. Sarah remained cautious, understanding that trust could not be rebuilt overnight. Yet she also recognized that genuine change requires time, patience, and effort. Little by little, her family began learning how to see one another without the filters of expectation and comparison. Meanwhile, Sarah's professional journey continued to flourish. SolarReach expanded its operations across multiple continents, bringing reliable electricity to communities that had lived without it for generations. What had once been a struggling startup evolved into a global force for positive change. Villages that had relied on candles and kerosene lamps now had schools illuminated after sunset, clinics equipped with refrigeration for medicine, and businesses capable of supporting local economies. Years after Sarah first joined the company, SolarReach celebrated a historic milestone: 1 million households powered through its renewable energy systems. Behind that number were millions of individuals whose lives had been transformed by technology, rooted in research that many people once dismissed as impractical. On the day the company announced the achievement, Sarah received a text message from her mother. Unlike previous messages that focused on success, money, or public recognition, this one was different. Her mother wrote that she was proud not because SolarReach was successful, not because Sarah had become wealthy, and not because the world now recognized her accomplishments. She was proud because Sarah had dedicated her life to helping others. She finally understood that the true value of Sarah's work had never been measured in dollars or awards. It had always been measured in impact. Reading those words, Sarah felt something she had not experienced in a very long time: peace. That evening, she returned home and opened a drawer she had avoided for years. Inside was her PhD diploma. Ever since graduation day, she had kept it hidden away because looking at it reminded her of disappointment and rejection. Slowly, she removed it from its protective cover and stared at the words printed across the page: Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Doctor of Philosophy in Environmental Engineering. For years, she had allowed that diploma to symbolize the approval she never received. Now, she saw it differently. It represented resilience. It represented sacrifice, determination, and belief in a purpose greater than herself. Most importantly, it represented a version of herself who kept moving forward even when nobody was cheering. Sarah carefully hung the diploma on her wall. As she stepped back to admire it, she realized that her greatest achievement was not the company she had built, the awards she had received, or the recognition she had earned. Her greatest achievement was learning that her worth had never depended on anyone else's approval. Not her parents, not society's, not even her own doubts. Her value came from the choices she made, the problems she solved, and the lives she touched along the way. Looking back, Sarah understood that every painful moment had shaped her journey. The sleepless nights, the failed experiments, the empty seat at her graduation, the years of comparison, and the long road toward forgiveness had all taught her the same lesson. Success is not about becoming who others expect you to be. It is about becoming who you were meant to be. And sometimes the most powerful victories are not the ones the world celebrates. They are the quiet moments when you finally recognize your own worth. As the lights of cities and villages powered by SolarReach continued to shine across the world, Sarah smiled. She had spent years bringing light to others. In the end, she had finally found it within herself as well.